Heath Cummings here with our Week 1 FanDuel pricing review. We're moving on to tight ends. Tight end is a strange position, I think, because you only start one of them, and I always kind of feel like I have a tough time finding bargains at tight end.
I would agree, and it's also, if you go the other direction, you can't play Gronkowski this week, and that takes away a significant advantage. Now, obviously, a lot of people like to play him, but
right.
It's nice to have that guy as an option.
Since we can't play Gronkowski, let's take a look at the top price tight ends that are available. Of course, Jimmy Graham at the top of that list, only $6,900, doesn't really seem real expensive. Jamey, I know we both love Kelsey in season-long drafts. This seems to me like a bad matchup in Week 1. Are you going to pay this price for him?
No, and I wouldn't pay the price for Graham either, because the Rams have been traditionally, under Jeff Fisher, great against defending tight ends, including Graham when he would come in there with the Saints. So both those guys are too high-priced for me, and Kelsey could struggle against the Texas defense. That's pretty good at tight ends as well.
Now, Dave, with the compression of pricing at tight end, $6,900 is the most expensive, so you're not saving a lot by going cheap. Does that make you more likely to go with one of these more expensive tight ends?
It might, but it really depends on how I feel about the running backs and the wide receivers. That usually dictates what type of a tight end that I go with if I don't already fall in love with a tight end at a great price with a great matchup, or even a tight end with a great matchup that I think is worth the price. There were times last year I started Rob Gronkowski with no reservations, even though he was expensive, because I expected a big game. And a lot of the times he came through. So it really is going to depend on how I feel about wide receivers. I think for Week 1 you can get by cheap at wide receiver. So if you want to splurge on a tight end, if you want to splurge on Travis Kelce, you can. You just don't have to, because there's other options out there.
Now, Jamey, it really looks to me like of that list of tight ends, the one guy that doesn't belong is Jason Witten. I think he's being priced based on what he's done in the past. You can't put him in that group, can you?
It's 2009?
It's not 2009.
No, I wouldn't put him in that group based on, reputation. Now, he could certainly finish in that group and start to price himself into that group as the season moves along, because if the loss of DeMarco Murray turns the Cowboys into a more pass-happy team, and look, he could easily play well in Week 1. I mean, they could have a game plan in place with the Giants so banged up on defense that Jason Witten has a 2-touchdown game.
Right.
But he doesn't have very many of those, and I don't know if you want to spend for him to have that type of performance.
It's too much money. $5,800 is just too
right.
much.
Spend $100 more and get Greg Olsen. It's worth it.
This next group of guys is not too much money, but they might be just because of the level of player they are. We're going to look at the cheaper tight ends on the slate. And Dave, this is kind of why I like to pay up at tight end. Are there any of these guys you'd trust enough to play in cash?
In a cash game, I would measure these guys against Greg Olsen, who I believe was $5,900. So I would probably take Olsen ahead of all these guys in a cash game. It's a different story in a tournament. You didn't ask me that. If I had to pick one of these guys in a cash game, I think Eifert would probably have to be the pick. Benjamin Watson, a very close second.
Okay, Jamey. Now, I think when you're going for a cheap tight end, you're generally just hoping for a touchdown. Any guy on that list that seems more likely than the others to score a touchdown this
I'm going to play matchup, and Benjamin Watson's got the best matchup given the offense that he plays in and what he's done so far in the preseason. I mean, you're talking about Drew Brees' #1 tight end right now, and the Cardinals, at least under Todd Bowles, the former defense coordinator, they were terrible. And so playing in a game where they're probably going to be chasing points on the road, it's still a good environment for them, because it's not like they're playing on an outdoor grass surface. They're playing on a relatively favorable surface for them. I think Watson's going to come through at that price. He's one of the first guys I put in my lineup when setting my Week 1 lineup. It was Sam Bradford and Ben Watson, and then the rest I'll fill out from there.
Okay, he brought up the Arizona defense. They have been historically terrible against tight ends. Does how a team was last year against a certain position weigh on how you factor them in Week 1?
No, it shouldn't. It really depends on what they've done during the offseason to try and improve. And Arizona's tried to do some things to improve, but I don't know if they've done enough. So that's why I can kind of look at Benjamin Watson's matchup and say, all right, it still should be open for him. That middle of the field, Drew Brees is going to look for it because Patrick Peterson's going to be on one side. And they've got Powers, I believe, on the other side. So that's going to open up some things in the middle. And Watson's going to be that red zone target for him. I'm taking him late in seasonal, traditional fantasy drafts just because I think he can get off to a hot start. I'll start him for the same reason in FanDuel.
Let's move on to our top tight ends of Week 1. Dave, you mentioned my top tight end earlier, Greg Olsen. I don't know who else Cam Newton's going to throw to against Jacksonville. I don't see Jacksonville being especially good at stopping Olsen, no matter who they put on him. $5,900. Of the elite tight ends, he feels like the best one.
Yeah, there's no question about it, and the price is right. You might be able to, listen, he's $1,300 more than Benjamin Watson, but I think he's safer than Benjamin Watson, which is why I think he's much better in a cash game where you're just trying to put the best lineup out there. I think that's why he fits that bill.
Your top tight end's a guy we haven't really talked about yet. I do really like the value. I like the matchup, Jordan Cameron.
Yeah, and it's the matchup against Washington that really sells it for me on Jordan Cameron. And I want to use Jordan Cameron while I can. I'm not getting him in a lot of my redrafts. In daily, though, I'll take him as often as I can at this price of $5,500. I think that's pretty cheap, all things considered, for a guy who's going to be a big red zone target for Ryan Tannehill. And he'll be like Greg Olsen light. He might even be better to start in a cash game lineup than Greg Olsen. Olsen might be a little bit safer, might get a few more targets, but when they get in the red zone, they're both going to have this big, giant target on them. Tannehill can hit it. Cam Newton can probably hit it. For $400 less, I think maybe Jordan Cameron is the better way to go.
You've got a little bit of a challenge here, Jamey, because I feel like 2/3 of this video has just been Benjamin Watson and Benjamin Watson, Benjamin Watson. What do you want to tell me about Benjamin Watson?
Give me a B. I mean, look, he's got the dream matchup. You know, if this was Jimmy Graham, what would Jimmy Graham be going for if he was still the Saints tight end?
$10 million.
Probably, Dr. Evil. I think you look at what he brings to the table. He's got to carry it through the rest of the preseason. He's got to stay healthy. And I don't know what Josh Hill's pricing is. I would imagine Josh Hill's probably a little bit more expensive than Ben Watson. But Josh Hill could be the guy that scores the touchdown. He's still going to be in these sub-packages that are going to be part of their goal line situation. You're taking a chance. I understand that because it's still a guy that's, you know, a retread tight end that's been in the NFL, which what seems like forever. I think he was playing with George Halas one of these days. But you look at where he does fit in with Drew Brees' offense matchup. I like that I could spend money elsewhere. I'll go cheap at tight end.
True or false, Benjamin Watson caught passes from Drew Bledsoe in New England?
True.
Okay.
It's true.
That will do it for our tight end review. Keep it tuned to CBS Sports for more FanDuel Week 1 pricing reviews.